Everybody has a story, and every story needs to be heard. On this podcast, we are talking with each member of the General Conference Leadership Council. I'm your host, Alyssa Truman, and this is A&N Profiles. Today we have with me Justin Kim, who is the recently appointed editor of Adventist Review magazine. Or is it Ministries? Or what is it, Justin?
Ministries. We do have two main magazines, as you mentioned. One is Adventist Review. It tends to be more North America oriented. Started in 1840 something. I want to say 1849. One of the oldest magazines. And we got Adventist World, which is worldwide and more than 1,000,000 subscriptions. I'm new to this job, so I'm getting my stats correct. But so we have those two are our main print products out there.
Okay, so Adventist Review Ministries
Mm-hmm.
it started off as the Sabbath.
It started off as the Present Truth,
By
James White back in 1849. And then it's gone through several name.
Wasn't it 1849?
1849. What did I say?
I thought you said 1949.
No, 1849.
I don't know. You might have said 1849.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah, 1800s, 1840s. And it was, and then it transitioned to the word with review in it, and which is kind of a weird term that we don't use that today. But it was looking back and seeing which articles were part of the Advent movement, and they could put those together. There's another magazine called the Sabbath Herald, and those are all about the Sabbath messages. So they put all those together, and it was known as the Review and Herald, which the publishing house retains that name. But it's a long, complicated story. But today it has evolved. Can I use that word? Evolved.
I think it's safe.
Okay.
It's safe here.
Yeah.
On this podcast,
Okay.
evolved is safe.
And then now it's the Adventist Review, and that's kind of where we've settled on for a while now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Actually, my husband, his first job ever working for the church, he was the designer for the Review.
On the way.
Yes.
Very cool.
One of my very first Christmas gifts to him, I bought him the very first piece of artwork that he commissioned from Nathan Green.
Oh, wow.
Yes, we went up to Michigan, we got it, and he actually, I think it took like 20 years for him to frame that piece of artwork and hang it in our house, but that's okay. Not about Trent. Okay, anyways, so today we're going to be talking about your life. We're glad that we got a little plug about the review. We'll probably do a little plug at the end again too, but we have a special connection. We like to joke around a little bit about.
Yes.
We are the 1980s babies.
Yeah, not 1880s, but 1980s.
Yeah, definitely. Although my kids might sometimes think I am from the 1880s. 1980, which I consider us GC young.
Yeah.
We're
totally
agree
with that.
Low 40s, and this podcast, I was kind of joking, it was going to be a little bit shorter because we haven't had as many years to live. So we're going to have to really stretch this out.
Okay.
So tell me a little bit about your parents.
Yeah. So my parents are immigrants, originally from South Korea, and they came over in the 70s, late 70s. Came to New York. I was born in 1980.
What part of New York?
Queens, New York City.
Oh, so you're part of the city, not the state.
Where are you from?
I'm from upstate New York. And I'm just going to say there's this whole state, city, Okay, but it's okay. You're from Queens. I still like you because you are from 1980.
I don't know. I got to reassess my worldview now.
You might. Anyways.
And then we moved across the river, the Hudson River, not to upstate New York, but to New Jersey. The wonderful, beautiful state of New Jersey. I was there for a while. I went to public elementary school.
Before we get to public school,
right.
I feel like we just missed 7 years of your life.
Oh,
okay.
Not much happened. I was a toddler.
What do your parents do?
My dad was in the importing exporting business with South Korean goods for a while, and now he's in the manufacturing industry. Yeah.
And your mother?
And my mom just had in and out jobs, just trying to make a living.
Now, did you grow up Seventh-day Adventist?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know the answer to that question. So my dad had somewhat of a Presbyterian background. My mom had somewhat of an Adventist background. I don't really remember going to church when I was little. My mom said that she brought me to church when I was like a newborn. She would sneak out of the house to go to an Adventist church. In Korean subcircle and a subculture, the Presbyterians and Adventists aren't the greatest of communities with each other. And I think I was in third grade, second grade, fourth grade, somewhere around then, where my parents just said, "Hey, we need to go to church because this kid needs some church in his life." And my mom was like, "Hey, I can't go to Sunday church because from what I know, I think she got baptized right before she came to America. It was my grandmother. My grandmother is like the matriarch of faith. She's the one that's been praying for all of her kids, praying for all the grandkids. And before she let her daughter go to America, she's like, you have to get baptized, whether it was legit or not or whatever, just, going through the process. And so that kind of still remained in my mom's brain. And so my dad and my mom went out to a Korean Seventh-day Adventist Church in New Jersey. We drove an hour to get there, even there were other Adventist churches. But Korean churches for immigrants, like going to your own people's church is like a thing, like a huge thing. And then through some evangelistic series, my dad got baptized. I remember, I don't know how old I was, but 12, 10, my dad got baptized in the swimming pool because we didn't have a baptismal tank in the church.
So you've moved to New Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
So at this point, you're in school.
Yep.
Your dad becomes an Adventist.
Mm-hmm.
How does that impact your family life?
Yeah, so we were kind of Adventists, kind of not. But I just remember at one point, like we got rid of all of our, gambling cards and anything that had to do like games. We got rid of just a big trash bag came around, just throwing that stuff out. And then I remember we would go out to church and then go out to eat afterwards, or go to movie theaters on Friday night, Saturday afternoon. But then that all kind of like stopped suddenly, and we didn't watch any TV all Saturday. And Saturday morning cartoons was a big thing, and I remember that just stopped. And I just thought, okay, well, that's just how our family is. This is how all Koreans live. So that's cool. I thought all Adventists were Koreans and all Koreans were Adventists. That was just kind of just
all
fuse the two
Korean,
together.
All Koreans are Adventists.
Yeah.
Well, this is a very interesting,
yeah.
very small world there.
So all Koreans don't eat shrimp and pork, and all Koreans don't work on Saturday, and
obviously,
yeah.
In your childlike mind, that makes so much sense.
Yeah.
So you continue though to go to a public school, correct?
I did, and I went to a Roman Catholic high school and a Jewish college. I know I'm speeding forward. I don't mean to, but I've just had different.
We'll explore all of those as we go.
We just had different. I had different educational experiences, which at the time was like pretty chaotic, but looking back on it, it's something that was very, very, very precious to me. Yeah.
So I like to find out, like, as a young person growing up in church.
Yep.
Obviously, all Koreans are Adventists and all Adventists are Korean. But what was your impression as a young person growing up in the Adventist church? Would you say that you had everybody was very accepting, or was it very hard lined? What was your impressions as a young person growing up in the church?
Yeah. So that's a great question, Alyssa. I don't know. As a child, it was just like, this is the way life is. Like, I didn't really even question that. So church, my memories of my local church, very warm, loving people. We ate a lot for potluck. We set up chairs on the gymnasium and then put them down and then made it into the fellowship hall. The preaching was in Korean, so I didn't understand the lick of the sermon. But Sabbath School was in English.
Do you speak Korean?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah, but preaching Korean tends to be on a different level than colloquial Korean.
I don't know because
yeah.
I don't speak or understand Korean.
Then we had our youth group, and I think the youth group provided a great social nexus for my faith. That's where we asked a lot of questions of questioning wasn't really a part of my faith because of the whole cultural language barrier. But having that youth group was like, oh, hey, so why don't we do this? Why do we do this? And it was an interesting thing. But yeah, I mean, I don't have my immediate family doesn't live in the East Coast. It didn't and still doesn't. And so the church was definitely my family. These are my uncles, my aunts, and so So in that sense, it was more of a cultural family than a religious spiritual family. It wasn't until much later that that got into my faith got really serious.
So I want to kind of talk a little bit about the youth group.
Yeah.
This is the best part about this because we have no idea what we're going to talk about. And
Yeah.
it's like, all right, which thread are we going to randomly pull here?
It's scary.
Well, I asked you if there's anything off limits, and you said no. We're good to go.
Yeah, let's do it.
So, a lot of times we hear that, when we ask questions, when young people ask questions, we're immediately just told, well, because the Bible says so or whatever. And you said that you were in this youth group where you were allowed to ask questions. Mm-hmm. What kind of responses were you getting?
That's a great question. I don't know if we were allowed to ask questions, but we ended up asking questions. And then I think a lot of us were from public school education. So we were always the weird kids. We were the ones that were always gone on Saturday for all social activities. So a lot of these questions did come up, and we had a variety of teachers. And then the ones that stick out to me were ones who, many of them did not know the answers to these questions. But the ones who were nice, kind, loving ones, because they were so nice, and they just said, that's just what we do. And there wasn't a Bible study. There wasn't a reason. And because it's just the way we do, then I guess that's the way we do. Okay. Right? Like that. I mean, there was, okay, don't ask the question, but that was enough, at least for me, satisfied, because they're a super nice person. And I want to be like this person when I grow up, like an older sister or an older brother. Then there were also authoritarian figures that I really remember. And they said, and there was no Bible study, there was no logic or rationale. Like, this is what we do, and just hard line. And that hard line, I think, caused, at least for me and the friends that I know, just to dig in our heels. But why? And caused us to naturally just go to the contrary position, and I don't know, because of that, and I'm exploring this now, but I just really believe, we're pendulums, mm-hmm. And whenever you stick hard on one side, the natural reaction is to gravitate to the other side. So I try to find some kind of balance and to lessen the momentum of the reaction when talking, especially with young people.
Yeah, I had very similar kind of a thing. I would ask questions, but I don't actually remember anyone ever explained to me the real reason why. But because of who they were to me, it was good enough.
Yeah.
And it was for me, it was my college years and later high school years where I really started to explore. But with my children, I have tried to take care of that pendulum because yes, it's very easy for them to be like, oh wait, what did you just say? So right. It's like I resonate with that deeply.
It's like playing counterpoint. It's like, Bach, you just do the high note, low note, high note, and just anyway, I don't know if that makes sense, but
it does. Because I do know Bach. Let's explore. You said you went to a Catholic high school, correct?
Yeah.
All right. So you're an Adventist.
Yeah.
Who went to public school.
So I was baptized when I was 12. My grandmother really wanted me to be, get Bible studies. And it all made sense. I believe the Bible. I believe God. Hey, sure, I love church. And my grandmother came from Korea. I was like, hey, it'd be cool for me to get baptized in front of my grandma. I got baptized and, she was on cloud 9. They said I was the next Timothy because Timothy's mother and grandmother were Jewish. And so here's his grandmother. And there was this kind of big thing. But I didn't really own it. It wasn't my faith. It wasn't, no devotional life. It was just kind of by identity alone. When I went to a Catholic high school, I guess your next question is why?
Sure. Let's go with it. Let's go with why.
A lot of people do ask, hey, why are you going to Catholic high school? So education is a big thing for Koreans and for Asians and for immigrants in general. The high school in my area was not a very good one, according to my parents. So they wanted to send me to some kind of preparatory school. The local Adventist one had closed down a few years before.
And they didn't want to send you to the boarding school.
And they didn't want to send me to boarding school, yeah. And so the Catholic school was the next best thing. And so we spent a lot of money. I was working. My parents also helped me with tuition, but it was a very good experience for me. I saw that they were in the back of my mind, I'm like, oh man, these are Catholics. They're trying to brainwash me. My church members are like, they're giving the evil eye to my parents. My parents are also a little bit anxious. What if this kid becomes a Roman Catholic priest? And little did they know, that I became an Adventist pastor. But I met people there who I so genuinely know that they love the Lord Jesus. Like they so love the Lord Jesus. Now, in terms of truth and Bible, I mean, they're totally whacked out on some of these things. But I just saw another group of people like, man, these are genuinely spiritual people. I had experienced racism in public elementary school, and in the Catholic high school, I didn't experience anything, just full acceptance. It was, and they weren't like, because we're Catholic, we're going to love you. It was just it was a different environment. And I remember I was spending my adolescence not rebelling against the church or my family or society, but rebelling against the Catholic Church. Like, it was just a great way to spend your adolescence.
So you're rebelling because that's what principles you were kind of like learning in school. So you're going to rebel against
and that was like I was sharpening my knife edge against, not Catholics, but Catholic doctrine. We had theology class every day. And, be talking about the Pope, and I'm like, well, why? And we're talking about, inspiration, tradition, the saints, the Eucharist, and then consubstantiation and transubstantiation. I'll be raising my hand. And there was other Protestants in the school with us. I'd be like, we will raise our hands together and coordinate our questions against the priest. And the priest gets stumbled, or he'd pull out some like wild card, like, oh, but we don't believe the Bible is the only, a document to resort to. I'm like, man, that's like cheating, man. And they have like, you got another 1,000 years of documents to like, we use this and this and this. I'm like, well, I don't know those. And so it was interesting. So I got to know my Bible a lot more on a theoretical level, but I loved it. I mean, it was great. Great.
I actually love that you've had these experiences with different religious communities, because a lot of us have grown up in Adventist bubbles. I was very much brought up in an Adventist bubble. I went to church, and actually I would say probably 2/3 of the church were my relatives in upstate New York. And it's just, for me, it wasn't until I was probably 23, 24, and I went out and I had a job, and all of a sudden I had all these non-Adventist friends. But it had not allowed me that time to be able to, during those formative years, really kind of challenge and understand. So I love that you were able to have this. And I think it has helped you a lot with your future life career choices, without maybe even having known that journey was going to help. So you graduate, I'm going to guess like top of the class, because the priest loved you and all your questions. You're not arguing with me.
No, it wasn't top of the class, I guess. Yeah.
And then you choose to go to which university?
Went to Brandeis University, Jewish-sponsored university near Boston, Waltham, Massachusetts. I got a scholarship to go there, and it was a different experience there. Jewish university. So it's not all Jewish, but Jewish-sponsored. No shrimp. No pork.
This is making it really easy for the Adventist boy.
Yeah.
I can just say.
I mean, Sabbath, like Friday night, like people are in a rush before sundown to get the place clean. People are withdrawing cash back when people had cash, in their pockets. And, just doing all their errands on Friday. And then Saturday, it's just like quiet, peaceful. And then Saturday, the sun drops. And it's just like these Jewish friends are just partying. They're partying a lot. So it's a similar cadence to Adventism, but totally in a certain sense, totally felt like a Gentile. In the Catholic world, even though you aren't Catholic, hey, you're still part of the community if you participate. In the Jewish community, not so much. There's a little bit more sharper lines for understandably so. They had everything that Adventism had, but no Jesus, which is a big factor. And I always like kind of laugh that when Adventists talk about, hey, we're so legalistic and whatnot. I'm like, you do not know what legalism looks like. Like, the Jewish community has legalism down to an art form. And that's not a criticism. it's for them it's meritorious. I mean, it's a point of praise, pride for them to do that. And so, Adventists we do struggle with legal. There are some of us who do struggle with legalism, but it doesn't come near with what I think human beings are capable of. And I say that in a way that's we should be wary of. It's been an opposite experience of my Catholic high school.
So I have two questions specifically about your colleges. One,
Yeah.
What was your degree in? What did you decide that the brilliant Justin Kim was going to get a degree in?
I was a bio and social major, biology and sociology. I wanted to get one degree in the sciences because I felt that was like, smart people study sciences.
Okay.
But then smart people aren't very social and they can't articulate, can't write, can't communicate with anyone. They're just stuck in their, microscopes. So I wanted a social science, and psychology seemed a little bit too out there. Was sociology I felt was a little bit understanding society, how large groups work, and how to start movements, and how to large masses of people. I studied propaganda and racism and all the isms out there, political. I mean, it was just a wealth. It was just it scratched every place that I was itching that the sciences did not assuage.
So you want to be a smart, articulate person?
I hated being in front of people. I did not want to be a public speaker of all things. That's the last thing I wanted to do. This is actually
hysterical. Yeah, so you're not going to be a public speaker.
I just wanted to
on paper?
Understand the idea. Yeah, to write.
Okay, so
I wanted to be a doctor, as the proper Asian male firstborn should be.
A doctor.
Yeah.
What were you going to be a doctor of?
I wanted to do. So after graduating Brandeis, I was doing some stem cell research at Harvard Medical and Mass General Hospital, and I wanted to get into research and find cures to diseases and neurological decaying diseases and all these things.
I'm really excited because I know where you are now, and I cannot wait to figure out this journey of how you get there. But first, what do you think that Brandeis University taught you about you?
It's a great question. I don't know. I haven't reflected on that. What has Brandeis
That's what we're here for.
Taught me about me? Man, it's like a counseling session. This is good. Well, it taught me that I need the Lord Jesus. It was hard. Brandeis was hard. Being in high school, I was on the top tier of my class. High school was pretty easy. University years were hard. You take our class was comprised of all these top kids from all around the country and around the world. You put them together, and I didn't come anywhere near the top. And they were all trying to vie for the same positions in society. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I know I wanted to be a doctor, but in my heart, I don't know if I want to go through all that, and I don't know what's going to happen. The other factor in all that was 9/11 happened around that time. So I'm like, man, the world's coming to an end. What am I going to do? Who am I? And I think these aren't questions that Brandeis University brought up, but these are questions that were brought up during my time in college. And religion, spirituality was the answer. And that sounds so cliche and whatnot, but it was the answer for all those things, not relief from stress, relief from the stress of classes and whatnot, but also why am I doing this? And how am I going to get through this? I found no other solace than church and Bible.
I think we think it sounds like an easy answer. I was actually talking with my older sister about this morning. How can people who are raised in the same home end up very differently?
Different experiences.
And how do we each cope with stuff a little bit differently?
Mm-hmm.
And we were trying to figure out what part does our faith have to do with how we deal with the issues that hit us every single day in our life. Because one of my siblings is an atheist, has completely left the church. And we both struggle with a lot of similar health issues. And we were trying to figure out what is the denominator? What makes the difference?
That caused the divergence in your guys'
and does our faith journey make it so that it's a little bit easier to find that purpose in life and to find that that thing. And we like to think it's an easy answer, but actually it's not an easy answer, because for many of us, as we're searching for these really deep things, it's actually something we've had to struggle with to get that to be the answer, because it's a lot of faith. The easy answer would be something that is tangible. This is intangible. And I think September 11th changed a lot. Our generation, especially. It was the very first thing that was like, I remember the Challenger exploding as a kid.
In the 80s?
I think it was like 85. Was it? I don't know. It was like 85-ish. I remember coming down the stairs. But like the Challenger, I remember that was a very specific, well, maybe it wasn't 85. I don't remember. When we were young.
Yeah.
When we were young, the Challenger exploded.
Yeah.
But 9/11 was a very hard time.
Yeah.
Because it shifted who we were, and something came to America, and it really caused us to reevaluate. What am I doing?
Yeah. Well, for me, it was like all those religious teachings and the spiritual teachings and like the last day stuff that we were all taught throughout the 90s. That was like the first sign. I would say it was one of the first signs. Yeah. One of the first signs that all could be a reality.
Yeah.
Because before that, it was like, how can America be like this evil, empire that's gonna, how is it gonna, clasp hands with Catholic, all these things that we in Adventism we've been saying for a while. There's just impossibility, right? I mean, we just conquered the Cold War, and now America's, we're the good ones in the 90s and helping out the countries. And then 9/11 hits. And then all these government things are happening, civil liberties seem like they're eroding away month by month. I'm like, man, this can happen uber fast.
Do you remember when, since we're 80s kids, this is fun because I feel like we were at the same point in life, and I feel like a lot of the things that we were taught around that time period were about this, the same kind of thing. But do you remember when the Iraqi war started? And I remember, because it was my dad's birthday when we went in, and I remember thinking this was the end because it's in the Middle East, and it's like you had this whole, like, again, it was how we were brought up, it was an interesting kind of a thought process that immediately your mind goes to anything that happens in the Middle East or whatever, that somehow maybe this is the beginning of the end. And so you've now been able to go through Catholic education and Jewish education, and you're doing stem cell research at Harvard. Justin, how on earth, like, where do we go from here? Like, something happens. What is this pivotal moment? I feel like we're at this moment. I don't even know, but I feel like we're at this pivotal moment. Something has to happen here.
So while that's all occurring, right when I graduated high school and was going to university, I had gone to a camp meeting, and at the camp meeting, there was
which camp meeting?
This was the Korean East Coast camp meeting where
There's
Koreans.
A Korean East Coast camp meeting?
We got these things going on that no one else.
Come on now.
Exclusive
membership. I just go to New York conference camp meeting. I didn't know there was like a special camp meeting.
Yeah, there's one on the East Coast and one on the West Coast in North America. And so we went to the East Coast one. And we had a preacher come, and this guy preaches the Bible in a way that it's not the normal cliche Bible sermons. Like, I used to believe that, you would sin for 6 days and you come to church, you ask for forgiveness and you get grace on Sabbath. And then for another 6 days, you can continue sinning. And I thought when you read the Bible, it's just like, you just have to know the general outline of each story, but you don't only have to know the Bible. But then I'm listening to this preacher, and this guy's preaching messages from these obscure stories and bringing out these things from each line, and they impact like my life, what I'm going through like right then. And I'm just like, I've never heard the Bible be so relevant, be so pertinent, so real before. I mean, it was like the Bible was literally speaking to me, like every single message. And I realized that this transcended the speaker, this transcended camp meeting. Like, I need to get to know the Bible better, because I don't know a lick of the Bible. I know Noah's story, I know of Abraham, but I don't know why it was written the way it was. I just don't know the Bible. I was thirsting for it. And then he was bringing out like this person named Ellen White. So I grew up in the church. I did not know who Ellen White was until I was about 17, 18 years old. right? They put her books in this glass closet in the church library, and it was kind of discouraged to read her. Like, hey, you can maybe read Desire of Ages and Steps to Christ, but some of the other stuff, like, you might end up being a little, extreme, and that's for the pastors to tell you how to. So I just avoided it. But going to this camp meeting, I mean, he was bringing out all these things that Ellen White had predicted and all the benefits of the spirit of prophecy. What is the spirit of prophecy? The role of the spirit of prophecy? I'm like, what? 1840? What is 1840? Sanctuary? Like, I was an Adventist, but I had no idea about these things. No idea. And I still get super excited to this day when I hear these things. And there's a whole group of us. We grew up in the church and we heard about these things. We're like, what? Victory over sin, 1888. Some of these eclectic teachings of the church, but they're not eclectic. They're really core to who we are as Adventists. So that was going on inside me somewhere, right? And then on the outside, I'm going through college. I'm going to teach. I'm not teaching. I'm working at Harvard. And there's a clash point, because the two trajectories aren't really matching. And then I was at the hospital. I remember being at the hospital. I'm doing apologetics with these PhDs about creation and evolution. I'm giving Bible studies to the receptionist who's a Catholic, and she wants to know about, prayer and the saints. I'm talking to these atheists from Italy and from Sweden about purpose and meaning, and I'm enjoying that a lot more than chopping off mice heads and taking their brains out and then slicing them and putting them into film and then creating 3D models.
I think we're good with that description now, Justin.
of the cancer that's in their brain. There's a divergence in my life. And I was like, Lord, what should I do? And I remember I was doing campus ministries, doing 3 Bible studies a week. And I was like, man, I want to do more Bibles. I want to teach Bibles. I want to talk about the Bible. It's just percolating in me.
So when you came back from camp meeting, you started doing all of this, or were you doing this before?
We started the 4 years was a work in progress. We started a group called Spark, Students Preparing Adventists for the Return of Christ, with a C at the end.
It's a C, not a K.
Yeah.
Okay, I was trying to figure out what the K was going to be.
We went to local churches out of our own dime. We do revival weekends. And then, so we're going to church to church to church, youth group to youth group to youth group. And eventually we got linked with a campus ministry group in Michigan. And they're doing similar Bible studies on campus, but we linked, and then we met other people who were born in 1980.
Of course, because,
Because 1980s. Sociologically,
why don't we explain a little bit about the 1980s here? Okay.
So sociologically, those born from 1978 to 1982 are called cuspers. They're a transition point from one generation to another generation. So when we read all those, which generation are you? Are you a millennial? Are you a boomer? Are you an Xer? Are you an alpha? Or whatever. Although alpha, anyway, we don't really identify with anyone. We identify with Xers and millennials together. And so we play a role in society. We help transition from one generation to another. And we tend to be ambidextrous in understanding and navigating through the annoyances of one generation and the weaknesses of another generation. So I think we have superpowers.
We pretty much are. We're superheroes. My favorite part about this is that it's 1978 to 1982, and my older sister was born in 77, and my younger sister was born in 83. So they don't even get to be a part of our. So
their superpowers are denied.
So it's just us. We are the cool club. So. So you met some other 80ers.
Meet this other person in 1980, and we're like, hey, let's do something. Let's do something for God, and let's start a little.
Who is this?
This is Israel Ramos. Yeah, and he's a punk kid, Hispanic from California, and then he was involved in campus ministry in Michigan. He's got a wonderful long story there too, and we just the two of us just still to this day, he's my brother in Christ, like just my best friend. But we just hit it off. We're talking about Bible stuff. We got similar sense of humor, but we got similar sense of like purpose and mission and what we want to do. Hey, let's do something. Let's do something for our generation. Like this is the greatest thing we can do for our generation.
I wonder what it's gonna be.
Like let's get our friends together. You get your friends from like the Spark, the churches that you visited, and I'll get the campus ministry people, and then maybe like 50 people will show up to our thing. Man, it's gonna be the biggest thing ever, and we're gonna invite like speakers that we want. We're gonna do Bible stuff. We're like fasting, praying. We're gonna like make it like uber spiritual, like pump it up like to the maximum volume.
So I know what we're about ready to organize. Okay. Right. But the purpose of organizing this was because you had this life-changing experience.
Yeah, for sure.
And all of a sudden your faith had gone from tradition.
Yep.
We go, every Adventist is a Korean, every Korean's an Adventist, right?
Yeah.
So we went from this tradition and just kind of knowing of the Bible, not really even knowing who Spirit of Prophecy, what that was. So all of a sudden internalizing the Word of God, what righteousness by faith means, that God wants to work in us and through us and not just be out there. And you don't want this to be just something for you.
That's right. That's right.
And so therefore, we start what is now known as GYC.
That's correct. Like it was like, how is it that there's so many Adventists that have never heard of this stuff, or they've heard of it, but it's just kind of like it's not internalized. And it was like, man, like I'm a sinner. Like I've heard that preached to me like so many times, but I am. But Jesus like saves me out of this, and he doesn't. It's not a temporary. Like it was. I think I was sensitive to just grace-oriented sermons. They're like, hey, God loves you, God forgives you, so go. But there was no transformative emphasis, and that was what was discouraging. But when it was like God transformed, what? How does that work scientifically? Like what change? Like what? How does a conversion work? Still to this day, I'm just. And then that sanctification process is of a lifetime, but he helps you overcome. But that overcoming, your salvation isn't dependent on that, right? That was another thing that we had to understand. But these things were like just so, and I wanted everyone in my social circles to understand. And if they only understood this, they would just take church and Jesus and life and religion, spiritual, all that stuff seriously. And that was the burden for GYC.
Eventually, I'm going to be interviewed because I'm also on GCLC, but for me, it was very much the same. I grew up, we were in this church. Like, I mean, I didn't know who Ellen White was and stuff like that, but there comes this moment where all of a sudden my faith became very real to me. And all I wanted was for everyone else to know.
Yeah.
And to this day, I'm still grappling with it. Like, what does this mean? Like, they had the big thing with revivals. That's like the big thing that we're all talking about right now. And I started pondering, like, what does revival look like within our lives? And it's like something that for the last month, that's all I can think about. And it's kind of what you're talking about. So you and Israel decide we're going to get together. We're going to do something for our generation. So tell us about this first event.
Yeah. So we just wanted like Bible saturation. We were super poor. Right. So back then, a long time ago, you had to pay for sermons. And so here we are as students. We're like, we don't have money to pay for sermons. Why don't we just hold a weekend?
What do you mean by pay for sermons?
Pay for tapes, cassette tapes.
Oh,
yeah.
I forgot about
cassette tapes. Yeah. Yeah.
Cassette tapes.
So before streaming, before MP3s, before CDs, there were these tapes and you had to pay for them. So you got regular sermons from your local church pastor, which were great, right? But like the good ones were recorded on cassette tape, which is a plastic contraption, like yay big, a square, a rectangle you put in a machine. And I mean,
you had to rewind. Yeah,
you had to rewind.
It was great. Yes.
My children have no idea what this is.
With a pencil.
That's right.
Yes. Great.
But we were poor, and so we're like, why don't we invite these people and we can just have them preach like 10 times on one day, just juice everything we can out of them, and that's what, we just pay for their flight or whatnot. So we created this get together, and I remember, and I was directly fed by what was called American Cassette Ministries at the time. They changed it to American Christian Ministries. Man, my theological foundation and nexus in life is directly attributed to this media ministry. And back then, like sermons were rare to get. And then I remember when we got like a good sermon, we would like pass it underneath the table to our friends. We're like, dude, you want to listen to this? Like, this is about like, Roger Kuhn, Cliff Goldstein's, latest series on Zechariah, or Doug Batchelor, C.D. Brooks, Breath of Life series. I mean, these names were like, just big baseball cards. I mean, we're trading out these commodities that we had. Now you get every sermon for free on YouTube, right? And it's just you type everything in, and then there's it's lessened the value of each sermon message.
That's an interesting thought. I never thought of it that way.
Yeah. So we started, because people were thirsting so much that why don't we create a venue where you can come and you can meet all these speakers face to face, ask them your questions, and then listen to like what about 6 and 7 of those sermons, and you get interaction with kids or young people, and this is what we call GYC, General Youth Conference is what we originally called it. Weird name. It's general for everyone, it's for youth, and it's a conference. So then we didn't think it sounded like General Conference Youth at the time. We've had some interesting dialogue with the youth department as a result was the confusion and whatnot. But we wanted, it was definitely scratching an itch, scratching an itch. Because we didn't get 50 people. We got 400 people the first year.
You had 400 people.
Yeah.
Where did you hold this?
This is in Pine Springs Ranch, California. They're coming out of the woodwork. We'd have nowhere to put them. So they're sleeping in bathtubs, 2 random people to a bed, in a twin bed, people sleeping in between the twin beds, totally blowing out the fire codes of the place. Next year we had 800 registered, but 1,000 people show up on Sabbath. Next year after that, 2,000. Next year after that, 4,000. Then it goes international, and it went viral before viral was a thing, before the social media was around. So I mean, we were just, this has to be of God. This isn't of us. And so now to this day, it's been 20 years. That was 20 years ago. And now GYC's all over the world, in South America, Africa, Asia, Europe, and GYC has now become kind of a household name in many Adventist circles.
And it really just stemmed from 2 young men who had call it a conversion.
Similar experiences.
Experiences.
Correct.
And wanted nothing more than for their generation.
Yeah.
A lot of kids from the 80s.
Yeah.
And we'll take all our spectrums here.
Yeah.
But we just want them to know God.
Yeah, that's right.
So are you still working at Harvard now?
So
what happens here?
All this is happening, and I'm like, why do I want to be a doctor? Like, why? Yeah, to heal them, and then and then the trajectory was to go to Loma Linda and then become a missionary and whatnot. But just I wanted to get Bible training, so I was like, should I go to Amazing Facts College of Evangelism? There was another one, Black Hills with Louis Torres, and far away in South Dakota and edge of civilization. So I may just go to seminary. Last place that I wanted. I've never wanted to be a pastor, preacher, public speaker, but I just wanted to know about the Bible because I'd be talking with people and I get stumped. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know how to answer that. And you have a really good point there. So I went to seminary and I was like, Lord, I'll just be here for 1 year. My parents were freaking out. They're like, you're not going to be a doctor. You're going to be a what? You're a pastor. And you do know there's a pay difference between those 2 occupations.
There's a pay difference.
I'm like, yeah, no, I'm aware. So just 1 year, and it was a 2-year program. So after 1 year, I'm like, hey, Mom and Dad, it's a 2-year program, so might as well finish the year out. I'm already halfway through it, and I just got all these speaking engagements. I got called to be a pastor at the local Korean church there. I got picked up by the Michigan Conference, and just more and more, it's just the Lord was opening more opportunities for me to preach and teach and to be a pastor. And then 5 years later, I got ordained and became a pastor.
So for those 6 years, did you work at the Korean church in Berrien Springs?
For 2 years, I worked at the Korean church in Berrien Springs. And then I worked at Campus Ministries at Michigan Conference, and I got picked up by Michigan Conference as a pastor.
So real quick, because everyone listening might not fully understand Adventism here.
Okay.
When we talk about the seminary is at Andrews University, which is in Berrien Springs, Michigan.
Yes.
It's freezing cold there.
Yes.
Much of the year.
Yes. For 11 months.
Yeah, 11 months. And maybe an extra bonus week if we want, right? what degree did you get while you were at?
So I was there for their MDiv program, and I switched to their MA program, and then I never actually finished the program because I got picked up as a pastor. Eventually, I got a Math Min.
Math Min.
Yeah.
Yes, I know, because I'm doing it now. So we have a lot that we get to talk about, right? It's not just the 1980s; it's our Math Min program, which I want to actually kind of like talk about for a few seconds here.
Okay.
It's a fantastic program that the North American Division offers.
Yes.
It's for people generally who
are in ministry
or are thinking about going second career into ministry.
That's right.
So maybe you've been a doctor, and now you've decided you want to maybe go, you feel God calling you to ministry. And so they created the Masters in Pastoral Ministry, North American Division, in conjunction with Andrews. And they travel around.
That's right.
So, for instance, every union hosts 2 classes, and after 4 years, if you go to the ones in your union, you're done.
And if you calculate it the right way, you can go to many unions.
Yeah, I'm not quite there yet.
And you can punch it out, which is not recommended because I mean it's for those who are working full time to be able to do that.
And in this, I actually just finished Doctrines on the Sanctuary with Davidson, which.
Awesome.
Can we just talk?
Awesome professor. Yeah.
He, by the time I was done, you had talked about like these core beliefs that we just don't know.
Yeah.
Here I've grown up an Adventist, and all of a sudden the idea of the investigative judgment, I was crying because I could not wait for it to happen. Yeah. Like the man is so passionate, it helps you see God in so much. Yeah. And it's like all of a sudden you're like, the judgment, bring it on, just like David, you know, and it was an incredible class, and I did Christian Leadership in a Changing World, which that book is, I'm reading a book in that class that's blowing my mind right now by Blackaby. But so I just wanted to give a shout out to NAD because
for sure.
Because they're helping a lot of us who want to be able to better articulate, who want to finish that master's.
Yes.
To be able to do it, to be able to work for the church that we love so deeply. And to be able to have the spiritual and theological knowledge we need in order to do so.
Yes.
So big shout out to NAD. Esther Knott.
Amen. Awesome.
In ministry.
Awesome. Love her.
Anyways, moving back to Berrien Springs. I feel like at some point in your story, a beautiful woman has to enter. Has she entered yet?
No, she hasn't.
Oh.
She hasn't.
Where do we get the entrance?
So just in my weird, like experience.
We were talking about your wife just.
Yeah. That's I picked up what you were throwing down. I wanted to say, Lord, my 20s are for you, right? And people are getting into drama and all this other business. Like I just want to just laser line focus. And I was 29 at the end. About to turn 30, I was like, Lord, that was a long 10 years. I'm pretty good. I want to get married like pretty soon because with a 3 in my age digit, like that's I'm on the upper limits now, and you gotta help me out. And so that's when I had a pastoral couple where I was good friends with the pastor, and he said, hey, you got to meet this girl. She's like a perfect match for you. She's from Korea. And I'm like, you don't understand. The last thing I want to link up with a Korean, and I know, and on her end, she didn't want to link up with an American Korean. They're not real Koreans. They're these Americanized, But we met. I was doing a series in Korea, and I had no other excuse. I had to meet this person, and it was just like, boom, we hit it. We had like a 3-hour conversation, just natural, as natural can be. We're talking about spirit of prophecy, about, life direction, meaning. It was just a really, really great conversation. The pinnacle of everything I was going through. And then she was also waiting for someone to have a similar kind of value system. And the thing that was awesome was she's like, if I don't meet someone with this value system, it's okay. I'll just be single. Like, why do I have to compromise some of these things? And then I had a similar perspective. Like, there's just to get married for marriage's sake. Anyway, so we got married. Yeah, we got married 3 times. We got married 3 times.
Well, what is her name? And
her name is
why?
Rachel Chi-hyun Kim. We got married once in America, once in Korea. There's another story there altogether. But we got married again legally in America for the immigration thing. It gets complicated. It's not very interesting, but that's what happened.
You're like, it's not interesting. I got married 3 times. Totally not interesting, guys.
Yeah.
Okay, we're just gonna move on because it's not interesting. So she moves to America.
She does.
and your campus ministries?
So I was what was I doing? I was communications director and Sabbath School director at Michigan Conference at the time.
Okay. So you've done campus ministries. Where were you located?
In Lansing, the capital of state of Michigan.
Okay. Were you working with specific colleges and universities, or just campus ministries as a whole?
All the campus ministries in Michigan.
So what is the purpose of campus ministries?
Yeah. So 80% of our Adventist young people go to non-Adventist universities.
Like you.
Yeah. We would love for them to go to Southern and PUC and Andrews, but 80% of our kids don't, because of finances, because of majors not offered, because of, I don't know, whatever reason. They go to Jewish college for scholarships that they give. So what are we doing to reach out to them? And these years are so formative for their future remaining 80% of their lives, what majors they're going to have, what worldview they have. And so rather than trying to get them into Adventist universities, which if they do, even better, we have a ministry dedicated to, one, finding these Adventists on these public universities and helping them to stay solid in the church, in the faith, but also getting them to a point where they, not us, but they are doing outreach to the students around them. And so it's a dual kind of a ministry there.
And when we say outreach, what we're talking about is helping people to understand who Jesus is and working in their life. Yeah. And then ultimately to trust and believe in the Bible. And if you believe the Bible, then the Adventist message is part of.
And doing evangelism on the university campus, not only to their peers, but to their professors, to the staff, it's a whole ministry out there. We have, ministry to hospitals, ministry to an education level and medicine, but also in the public education world.
So you've been helping with this, and now you're called to Sabbath School, personal ministries, and communication.
Yeah.
What is the purpose of a Sabbath School personal ministries leader?
Yeah, it's a good question. So that particular ministry is basically the lay ministry of the church. You have ministerial, who's in charge of training and inspiring, encouraging pastors. But what do the lay people do? Do the lay people just sit on the side and applaud whenever the pastor baptizes and gives them tithes, or, No, lay people also need to be active and doing stuff. And the venue for that is Sabbath School. But there's also personal ministries that one-on-one, whether it's literature, whether it's personal preaching, or outreach skills and one-on-one. That's what the department is really in charge of.
Okay. So you serve in Michigan Conference. We're going to kind of move this forward a little bit.
Yeah.
And at some point.
So those are my experiences. I had campus ministry, communications, and Sabbath School. And I got a call in 2016 saying that the General Conference is looking for someone with these three backgrounds. Someone who is in the Sabbath School world for sure, who knows how to write and is in the world of communications and social media and public speaking, but also has a lot of experience with young adults. And they
Which
couldn't.
Which is not actually easy to find that.
Well, yeah, they couldn't find anyone.
Three things.
That's what was communicated to me. And so they're like, should they cancel the position? They talked to somebody who talked to somebody who talked to somebody, and they're like, hey, there's this weird Asian guy who may have those three experiences in Michigan. So I got interviewed, and that was the clincher for me, to be honest. Because here I am, I'm working with young adults. That makes sense. Got called into communications. Okay, well, I know how to use a computer. I know how to record. I know a little bit of websites and social media. Okay, communications. Sabbath School. I love the Bible. I love teaching it. I love, Sabbath School. Okay. But Lord, why really these three things? But, you're the Lord. I'll just be faithful in the responsibilities you've given me. So I'll just do it. More than a paycheck, it's like you've given me this fear. Okay. And now this responsibility on a world level is needing these three qualifications. And I'm a huge believer of trajectory, right? The Lord gives you these experiences. They may not make sense in the moment, but in hindsight, we're like, oh, because of this and this, and now it makes sense now. And that momentum helps me not to question the weird stuff that happens now. Because I know in the future it may make sense. But I have to believe in that trajectory that the Lord's leading me.
So you're called To be the
to
assistant?
the assistant director at Sabbath School and personal ministries at the General Conference.
And you oversee Inverse.
Inverse. At the time, it was called Collegiate Quarterly.
Mm-hmm.
It was the Sabbath School division for 18 to 35, but called Collegiate Quarterly.
So you're young-ish when you come here.
Sure.
Did you ever feel like a fraud?
Did you ever feel like a fraud?
Did you have imposter syndrome?
Define that. What does that feel like?
Well, I could tell you because I've experienced it. But like, did you ever just like feel like, you know, all these people, Clifford Goldstein's down the hall from you.
Yeah.
You know, you talked about him. He was he was one of your cassette
Yeah.
tapes. Like you're here with all these people.
Yeah.
You know, it's like I remember sitting in the cafeteria like the first day and Derek Morris came and sat down next to me and I'm like, who am I? Derek Morris.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, did you ever feel kind of like this fraud? Like, I'm Justin Kim from Michigan Conference. And
I don't know if I felt like an imposter. I was geeking out all the time. You know, I was just like, that's Mark Finley. That's you know, Cliff just passed by. I'm breathing the same air that came out of his nostrils, you know.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah. And I felt very,
Sorry,
now I don't feel that way anymore.
Sorry again,
very,
Cliff.
very privileged to be comrades with him in the ministry. But more like just enamored with the responsibility. And I think what was my drive was I have this huge responsibility of this Collegiate Quarterly CQ. What can I do to make it better? And the Lord has called me because I'm young, and because of my past experiences. I felt not qualified to be hanging out with all these other GC folk, but for this responsibility, I felt like very passionate to update, to change, to infuse whatever past experience the Lord has given me to make it better. And if the world loves it, awesome. If not, He can fire me, and I'll just go back to chopping off mice brains. Like that's
Ooh,
okay.
Let's
with me.
not go back there. Did you ever feel like because you were young and you were trying to lead? I mean, it's an important project, and we talk a lot about our young people leaving the church and trying to be able to convey, you know, biblical truths to them that are relevant and timely for the times that we're living. Did you ever feel like because you were young that you were not accepted?
At the General Conference?
Yes.
I have not felt that way.
And the reason why
I think more, if I can add, probably more of a frustration was not being understood as a young person. But that lack of understanding was not an unwillingness from older generations. It was more of a they weren't able to.
Not quite communicating on the same.
And so there was more like, oh well, they're well-meaning, but they can't. So there was there was no animosity on my end, but but it was a very big frustration point. Like why can't they? Why don't they? But they don't know how on that wavelength. So I tried to communicate as best as I can and whatnot, but I didn't have that experience.
So a saying I love is people get it when they get it, and not a moment sooner. And really, it's on us to try to get them to understand it.
Correct.
And it's like we get frustrated that they don't get it.
Correct.
But the bottom line is we have obviously not articulated well enough to help them.
Yes.
And so rather than us just blaming this older generation, it's our privilege to actually be able to help them understand it in a way that makes sense to them. Just like my poor teenage children have to try to make sense of things to me. So the reason why I ask that question is because, you know, sometimes there's a lot of tension within the church, like all these different generations and stuff. And my experience here in the GC is very similar. I've never felt looked down on because of my age or my gender. And I think that what I actually find is a building full of leaders who genuinely want to let the world know the good news. And yes, sometimes there's some silos and territorial things. It is with every,
you find it really
whatever.
Anywhere.
But they're just excited to have other people who have that same passion.
Yeah, no, I would fully agree with that. Like before coming to GC, I thought maybe there would be like this whole, liberal, conservative, or, Western versus Eastern, or black, white, racial, tensions. And I mean, I don't want to sound like those don't exist, but I haven't tangibly experienced those. I'm sure there are undercurrents of, as there are anywhere, but the thing that was been most tangible has been a generational difference. And it's forced me in my spiritual development and growth that I've always looked up to the older generation, and because I've always looked up to them, I would always blame them. Why don't it's the onus is on you to understand me, and you must take the initiative to X, Y, or Z. But I realized the greatest equalizer is they see us not as young, but just as equal partners, and so then the onus is on like you said, on me to place myself in their shoes and try to understand why don't they understand some things. It's been hard on a lot of issues. On other stuff, it's just been mind-blowingly. It's been an experience. Like, hey, why would they give up this for a position of insecurity our generation totally embraces? And helping understand issues from that perspective, from their shoes, has been also a growth point for me. I don't know if that was too abstract, but
no, I think I resonate with it because okay. I've had to kind of struggle through those same things, and
a struggle is a good word.
I have found it more and more to be a privilege, because I realize that the work that you and I are doing is those cuspers. We get the privilege to start bridging these generations, and the relevance that our children's generation wants, and the generation of leaders now, we get this privilege to start trying to help them to see and to be able to speak each other's languages. And it doesn't mean it's easy, because we're trying to convey two wildly different mindsets, almost
cultures, and even if you will.
I mean, they don't necessarily fully understand social media, but we even talk about that, because Adventist Review Ministries is so much more than magazines now.
Yeah.
But I sat with Billy Biaggi, he's older than us. And I've never met a man so passionate about digital evangelism and media. And the bottom line is, he probably fully doesn't understand all of it, but he understands that it is a mechanism to preach the gospel to a whole generation, that's where they are. And we have to meet them where they're at. And he's such an evangelist and like believer in it. And that's an incredible, to me, that's great leadership, where I can champion something even though I don't fully understand it. And to me, that's what I often see with the leadership. But it's our generation who's trying to help them to see that and help them get that passion, so that the generations coming after us can work to continue to build on that. Because I know we're wrapping up here with our time. I in the last year, you were Sabbath School Personal Ministries. You did Inverse. This is gonna be like a quick fast forwarding here for a little bit. You start Inverse on Hope Channel. And I think Siku, who was over in Sabbath School Personal Ministries, she was part of that program. I think Israel was a part of that program. That's right. And I'm trying to remember the other face.
We had Sebastian Braxton and another friend, Callie Burachara, and then Jonathan Walter. And we've all been friends for a very long time, but we also kind of represent different areas of the globe. I'm Asia. We have Sebastian Braxton from Jamaica Islands, Israel from Latin America, Callie, Caucasian North America, Siku from Africa, Jonathan from Europe. And that we could talk about Bible stuff, do Bible study, not about the Bible, but in the Bible, parsing out texts, but at the same time, like having fun. And like bringing up an experience or an insight or whatever, a teaching, and then saying, I don't see that at all, or making fun of them, or like, man, that's you're totally making that up, and allowing some of that interaction. I think we need those two things: the fun component and then the Bible truth, and just kind of the two don't mesh well, and the wrong combos can be disastrous. But in the right combo, the right recipe, it's just becomes a nice experience. And I think our show is a good example of that.
So last fall, I don't know if you get a phone call, if you get a visit from somebody. Did it take you off guard slightly to know that they were considering you as the editor?
Yeah, totally. It felt like, I'm here in the little leagues, and we would like you for the pitch for the World Series, kind of like, I don't know if I can use a baseball illustration, but
well, you just did.
I just did.
I mean, we'll go.
But
with
it just
it.
felt very like there's totally not on my radar whatsoever.
When I heard that you had been selected, I couldn't think of a more perfect individual.
Oh, you're kind.
You're and I hope that when everybody has heard your life story and they've seen this passion, your life experiences help you to be able to relate to so many different people. Your passion, it's contagious. Listening to you talk about your love for Christ and how he has transformed you and how you just want the whole world to know.
Yeah.
But that bridging of those gaps between the generations, Adventist Review, to me, I was so excited because all of those things I think are going to uniquely mold exactly where Adventist Review Ministries needs to go. When you sat there in Michigan thinking like, oh, God's using these 3 different things to bring me here. And I think we often think this, like, oh, God, oh, and then look, I've gotten here, right? Actually, he's now using your time at Inverse and being able to understand that to take you to this next place.
Yeah.
This to here was not just the end game, and it's like, we don't understand God's end games. I've been an Adventist Review reader for years. I actually read the physical magazine since I was married. Kids View, all of that. I know it, right? It's near to my family's heart because of my husband's time there.
Mm-hmm.
Justin, if you could identify, you've now had long enough that you know this, okay? What is your desire, your heart's desire for the magazine moving forward, for as long as God allows you the privilege to stay here?
Sure. So like on like a cold, sterile level, we do want to update some of the forms of digestion, of media digestion that the Adventist Review has. So that's kind of on the business answer, like
it was beautiful.
Social media and a great app and all the technical stuff. But on a message content level, Adventism has so much to offer. It's a worldview. It's not another piece of article, not another clothing, an article of clothing that you put on. It's the glasses by which you see the entire world. And so we hope that Adventist Review and its various products and shows and whatever pieces of media out there helps us view the world in light of what Adventism truly is. What Jesus is doing something right now, like real time, in vivo, in the heavenly sanctuary. How does that impact, ChatGPT? How does that impact, the politics that are going on? How does that impact, TikTok, whether it's going to continue or not? Like making these connections and helping us make sense of the world that we're in. And, it seems, is Jesus really coming back soon? Is he not? It's just some of these connecting points that we need to have introduced on a world level. I hope to bring that kind of connection point to everyone out there.
Well, I'm excited from the GC communication standpoint because we already are starting to tear down some silos.
Yeah, for sure, which is very exciting.
And we're partnering together and we're finding ways to collaborate more and
Yep.
to be able to proclaim the gospel,
Mm-hmm.
knowing where our lanes are so we can go faster in our
Yes.
lanes, so we can proclaim faster and further than we have ever been before. And I'm
Amen.
so thrilled that we were able to spend this time together.
Yeah,
I feel like I got to
yeah.
know a lot more about you.
This is good.
You'll have
Sounds
to
like a
listen to
counseling session.
mine.
This is good.
Oh, here we go. We can do it again sometime. Anyways, we hope you enjoyed this episode of A&N Profiles with Justin Kim. If you haven't already, please take a moment to subscribe to our podcast or our YouTube channel wherever you're tuning in today, so you don't miss any of our future episodes. Thank you for spending this time with us, and join us next week as I continue to get to know the life stories of more inspiring people.